Hello, I am Lisa Gardner, the co-founder of OMS Strategic Advisors and host of the Uncompromised podcast, where we have an unwavering commitment to values, beliefs, authenticity, integrity, character that brings heart and care to an organization. I'm bringing you some of the business's brightest uncompromised executives and thought leaders to discuss challenging corporate norms. Today, I'm very excited. We are joined by Herman Bowles, who's the Vice Chairman Americas, as well as International Director and the founder of JLL's highly acclaimed public institutions, which specializes in delivering comprehensive real estate solutions to federal, state, and local governments, nonprofit organizations, and higher education institutions. Working with the firm's largest public and corporate clients, Mr. Bull has devised and implemented integrated real estate strategies to lower occupancy cost and increase productivity. During 33 years at JLL, Herman has worked in the areas of development, investment management, asset management, facilities, operations, and business development retention. With a remarkable career spanning from military service to senior roles in real estate, Herman brings unparalleled expertise in developing comprehensive solutions for diverse clients. A West Point and Harvard alumni, he's a strategic leader on several national boards. Join us as we dive into Herman's journey, blending military discipline with real estate innovation. Welcome, Herman.
It's great to be here, Lisa. Thanks for having me.
And I want to personally thank you again. I've said it earlier on behalf of Lawrence and myself and so many others for being a mentor, a pioneer in many regards. In addition, an inspiration and encouragement as we have navigated through the opportunities and challenges of commercial real estate. I want to personally say thank you again.
Well, none of us are an island. We don't do anything alone. And I can say that we all stand on the shoulder of giants.
Absolutely, we do. We all do. I would agree with that. Let me ask you the first question. As you look back over your life in the corporate real estate industry, what are you most proud of?
Probably a couple of things. It's hard to pick out one. And one I'm going to start with that even is more of a community perspective to corporate real estate than the things that I've done, perhaps to somewhat of a trailblazer innovator in the industry, period, and not necessarily black or white. And that's starting the African American Real Estate Professionals Group. And that is an organization that started here in Washington, D.C. I, along with two of my colleagues here in Washington, started the first branch here. Now you have one in Dallas even, and they're in Atlanta, New York, LA, San Francisco, had one in Boston. And what this group has done is look at real estate very similar to the Executive Leadership Council, which I hope many of your members are aware of, but if they're not, they should be, which is a group of the 800 most senior African-American executives in the world. And our goal there is to not only help one another, I'm talking about ELC now, but also to promote others so that we can make sure that we have a pipeline into the corporation. We have representation in the C-suite, and something we started about 15 years ago, which has gotten a lot of traction, making sure we have representation in the boardroom. And that is just a phenomenal task. And I saw that and thought, hey, this industry, remember this industry I started in over 30 years ago, 34 to be exact. And as I went around my day-to-day activity, I very seldom saw a person that looked like me. The person I saw was, that looked like me may have been the messenger, people cleaning, et cetera, et cetera. And I'll tell you some more stories how I used my influence at the time as a vice president to actually have an impact on what we do, and which we should all do in terms of, it's not about just getting there. It's what do you do when you get there to help others?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You mentioned the ELC. I remember that was one of the first conferences I attended. Ron Parker at the time was head of Frito-Lay. human resources, and I worked for headquarters, and he selected a few of us to go and attend the ELC. And so very familiar with it. And so I could see how you were trying to draw a parallel between the two organizations. I think AAREP is serving in that capacity as well. And I think that's what you're saying as well. Exactly. What seems promising for the next generation when it comes to business? What will be those challenges?
The promises or the challenges?
Both. Let's go with both.
Let's start with the promises. The promises just for corporate America, period. And of course, it took some awful events such as George Floyd to wake up the conscience of our corporate America anyway. And I think what that has done is opened up an opportunity to talk about things. Okay. I was on a panel yesterday in New York City with Mary Bush. And if your members don't know her, they should, a prominent female who has served on 15 public boards, and Ursula Burns, who we know as the first African-American CEO of a Fortune 100 company in Xerox. And we were on a panel sponsored by Board and Directors Magazine in New York City that a whole bunch of people paid a lot of money to come in to hear us speak. But our panel was on capitalism and, you know, what's good and bad about it. And we all sat there on that stage with the audience. Majority of them did not look like us. Okay. And the powerful thing is that we had the stature, the stage, and the opportunity to say things. And it wasn't in an antagonistic manner, but it was in a manner to communicate, look around this room. We have all of these corporate directors in here, and we don't look like or represent America. And that is something we think about. And we ask ourselves why. And this is something I talk about in the boardroom. And I made this, I won't call it an appeal, but I made this statement yesterday. And I think this bodes well for all your listeners out there who are both women and minorities. If you look at the statistics, Lisa, particularly from the Census Bureau, probably between 2040 and 2050, so let's just say 2045, the majority of the people in America are going to be people of color. Right now, when we look at people under the age of 20 in America, the majority of them are what? People of color. So when you go into the boardroom, when you go into your company and you're thinking long-term, because you got to certainly get through today, but you've also got to think about tomorrow and that other tomorrow that's a little later. Ask yourself, who's going to invent the products and services that you use that's going to this market that we talked about? Who are going to be the employees that are going to make and deliver the products and services to this market that we're talking about, majority minority? Who is going to sell them? And this is from the corporate perspective of capitalism. Who's going to buy them? So throughout that chain, if organizations aren't realizing that they must have a diverse base, it's not about affirmative action. It's about a business imperative for success.
Absolutely.
And I think that sets the stage for the young people out there today to have a phenomenal opportunity to understand that. So that's the opportunity. What are the challenges? The challenges are, you and I are both parents, right? And I have a theory that each parent, if each parent out there does their part for their little micro family unit to prepare that next generation to go out and take advantage of these opportunities, that's when great things happen. So the challenges they're going to have, I tell you, okay, there's going to be outright discrimination. And that may even be better because you understand it. There's going to be unconscious bias, which you may be on the receiving end of, and the person doing it doesn't even recognize they're doing it. There's going to be the entire concept I call being pet to threat. And let me explain that one to your listeners so they understand it. I can remember when I joined LaSalle Partners, the predecessor firm to Jones Lang LaSalle. And I was the shiny new pet object. A Black guy, went to West Point, went to Harvard Business School, phenomenal leadership experience in the Army. And by golly, I'm going to adopt him. And a lot of people did. Okay. but I'm the pet. As I progressed in my career, which happened fairly quickly, you go from being a pet to a threat, because most people see the world as a zero-sum game. The pie is the pie. And if you see the world that way, and you see somebody else whom you may have even helped get to that point, and all of a sudden you wake up one day and say, wait a minute, there's not going to be any pie left for me. And people's reactions, nothing so drastic and overt that it would constitute, action that should be taken by someone, but just the covert activity of understanding that this person whom I've been trying to help, and they were my pet because I felt very good about what I was doing to help them. All of a sudden, they're a managing director. They're running a business. Oh my gosh, you're a threat. And that some people don't like it when I bring up that analogy. I want your listeners to be aware of the reality of that analogy.
The pet to threat. There's two things that come to mind. Number one, you're absolutely right. I think we all have experienced, if you're a woman of color, African American, a man of color, that yes, you were hired in. You were the one person hired in. But as you began to succeed, yes, we have experienced where we've been a threat. Even opening up our, when I think about opening up our own company 15 years ago, we've gone through that same cycle as well. And what I find interesting, which you touched on, is the fact that why is it that we would not be secure enough to want to see that our success are those who do move ahead of us, are those who do better than us? Or, maybe we're afraid to promote someone because we think they're going to move ahead, or, even when it comes to people of color, but why aren't we celebrating that as people, whether it's people of color or not? I think you hit on that a little bit more as well. I find that that goes very much with even the purpose of this podcast when I think of not compromising yourself personally or professionally. And I think it has to do with character. The fact is that you celebrate those that are leading their path. And even if they surpass you, you celebrate it all the more because you've been successful in helping them get to where they're going. And that goes for a platform, whether it's people of color, African American, or whether it's women, or whether it is, whoever it may be. I hope that made sense to you as well.
Oh, it definitely resonates with me. And I just think it's important in terms of, us thinking about the future and those who are successful salmon running up the stream. Don't forget where you came from. Okay. What I mean by that is you certainly achieve success in some sense. That does not mean that you lose your identity in something you said at the beginning of this podcast, authenticity of who you are as an individual. And you can't let the bright sun and the stars blind you as to the reality of the real world that you live in.
Well said. Well said. This segues into my next question for you. And I think you've hit on it, because this was the other thing I wanted to say, and you said this. There is no other option but to diversify. Like you said, diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's a business decision at this point. We can take the emotion out of it. It's a business decision. We need people at the table who are leading and making decisions that look like the marketplace they serve. So for us, that is literally how we approach it. That is bottom line. It's a business decision. And knowing that, what do you believe people compromise the most within business environments?
Probably expediency, right? If you look at, I have the pleasure of serving on several corporate boards, and I'm actually chair of a public company board. And the reality of quarter to quarter, that's kind of where the grades come in. You get your grades, and the majority of the boards I've been on, there's no doubt at times we're looking at that quarter because you got to look at it. However, if you have the discipline to truly be long-term, and some corporations you're long-term and the activists come in, you're no longer there. So it's a really difficult balancing act.
Mm-hmm.
And the expediency portion of it, and what some examples of that, particularly as it relates to diversity, everybody focuses on the input pipe. We got all these people and we get them in. And what is important, and what I talk about is, yes, I want to see that, but I want to understand about the retention and advancement.
Mm-hmm.
Because I cannot tell you, Lisa, I am not going to take all the credit for it, but I will tell you probably at least 5 times a week, and sometimes 10 times a week, I get calls from African-American men and women about JLL. And the point I'm making here is that branding is so important.
Mm-hmm.
JLL, we've done a phenomenal job in improving over the years.
Mm-hmm.
And fortunately or unfortunately, for the last probably 20, maybe even 25 years, I've been the senior most prominent person at JLL as an African-American, I would say, person of color.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And people see that and they embody something positive and say, and it's a responsibility I have. Hey, I want to be like you.
Mm-hmm.
And they call, and I, this probably as a result of this, I'm going to get even more calls. They call me and they want to talk, and I do as many as I can. I never say no. It may take you time to get on the schedule.
Mm-hmm.
And the point I'm making is that organizations, in order to keep the pipeline open for inflow, you've got to keep, as Jesse says, hope alive. You keep hope alive when people see individuals throughout the organization look like them, and they feel that, hey, I can do that. And of all the people, period, black, white, that I've mentored over the years, I explain them what having a mentor is, and that's somebody that's going to help you do things. They're going to give you feedback and help you put device strategy. And a sponsor. Sponsor is someone that talks about you when you're not in a room. Mentorship, you can ask for. Sponsorship, you earn. You earn that. So the point I'm trying to make is all those people, particularly in the firm, and even outside, if they come and they're not prepared when they want to talk to me, they talk to me and say, well, tell me about yourself. I'm like, there's so much out there you can Google. Don't ask me to tell me about myself.
Could have already known before you walked in the room.
Take that and say, tell me how you did this. Because no matter how successful we are, we're still egotistical in a sense, right? And we want to know that you thought enough of us to do the research and then come up with the appropriate questions to delve into what you're talking about. But the point here, I want to make sure I keep my train of thought, is you have this phenomenal opportunity to be successful. You have to prepare yourself. And these people, even in the firm, and I'll tell any of the people in the firm, I'm your biggest supporter as long as you're producing. When you're not doing what you're supposed to do, if you're unaware of it, I'm still going to give you a size 12 kick in the butt, because you're not showing the emotional intelligence to understand the difference between good, bad, or indifferent. Okay. And if you are trying your best and you're still not doing well, maybe this isn't made for you. And guess what? For some people, that is the case. It's just not meant to be. You need to be in a different type of industry. And those are tough conversations to have with people. And Lisa, what this all comes down to something that I call leadership. Okay. And leadership is the ability to lead a group, to accomplish a group or an individual to accomplish a common goal. And that leadership is about being direct. It's also about being empathetic. It's about being timely. It's also about being consistent in terms of how you give feedback, how you motivate others, and how you hopefully make the organization a success.
Very good. Very good. What do you think holds What have you seen has been sort of the pattern of those who don't make it in the business? Is it there's a book, and I don't want to say it's things that you don't learn in a classroom, or maybe it had the word Harvard in it. I'm not sure, but basically it was talking about the characteristics of discipline, consistency, some of those things that you're naming, time management, all those things. What are you finding that's holding people back from being successful in this business?
There's a young man, he maybe listen to this podcast. I'm not going to mention his name,
Mm-hmm.
whom I met in a social setting, and he really wanted to be in real estate. And I got to tell you, all the form that you ever wanted, it was there. Enthusiastic, go-getter attitude, and heard everything, putting
Mm-hmm.
everything together. And this individual was hired and lasted about 9 months. Okay. And I still talk to this individual,
Mm-hmm.
and I had the opportunity to talk to the individual and talk about, why did it not work? And in many ways, that might have been the best thing that ever happened to this individual, because they were using what they had as bravado and personality, which covered up that there was a lot of form and not a lot of function in terms of their expertise. Okay.
Yes.
So I want to say two things here, and this is particularly true for women, period, and particularly true for Black men.
Mm-hmm.
There is a fine line between confidence and arrogance. And to make it even more difficult, the line changes and it's squiggly based upon the circumstances and conditions.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell people, you want to go up to that line all the time, but you don't want to go over that line. And understand, as particularly a Black, because we'll talk about the angry Black female, perception as well. I think both of those are important to talk about. But as a Black male, isn't he arrogant? The white guy does the same thing. Isn't he confident? Exactly same thing, but it's based on background, perspective, and perception. And we have to be aware of that. You can't take the play and run the play the way the guy next to you, who may not be of the same ethnicity as you. You can't do that. You say, well, that's the way John did it, so I did it that way. Those subtleties are so important to understand, make it in this world. And maybe you can be taught, but you definitely got to understand it. So go up to that line of confidence. But once you go over that line, okay, people, and sometimes people perceive, in my career in the past, people have perceived me going over that line. Okay. And, I got to tell you, I'll put my credentials up against anyone, okay, in terms of
Absolutely.
the training and experience and these types of things. And then maybe it does come down to, what are the expectations for you with your skin color being a little different versus what are my expectations for someone else? Okay. And then if you exceed those expectations in a way that is not consistent with the perceptor's perception of you, it can cause disconsonance. And that's where a lot of issues with people on the workplace, I think starts. Okay. I'm trying to be all I can be. I'm looking at you as a minority in what you do, and I'm just not identifying with it. And you just gotta, those subtleties, you just gotta be aware of.
What's so funny is we have raised our kids to understand what you just said. I believe that my own mom and father even let me know, Lisa, the way that you go through life will not look like the majority you're around. You cannot respond in the same way. You cannot have the same habits or the same behavior in the same way, right? And it's interesting that you were talking about the workplace, because when I thought about it, I was going back to even just when we walk into meetings, my nonverbal has to be very careful versus the one next to me maybe does not have to be as careful in their nonverbal or their verbal. And I think that is, I think that was so well said. I had never thought about the fact of communicating that out loud. It's just something that we teach in our home, and it's something that we do. I think that's just very well said.
Thank you.
Let me ask you this, Herman. Here's my next question. I was going to go on the personal side. Where in your career, I want to talk more about you. Where in your career have you had to make a pivot? And what I mean by that, you were headed down one direction, you had your plan, but you had to pivot. And what challenges did that create? And what was the outcome? Because obviously the outcome was successful, but just want to understand how you work with that dynamic.
Yeah. The first thing I want all of your listeners to understand is that there is not a straight line to success. And a failure is an opportunity to reassess. And I've had a few, and I'll start with after I went to Harvard, I took a class in real estate. I was really interested in real estate. I went to West Point as a professor, got a group of people together, another Harvard grad and smart people. And we put a syndicate together and we bought a piece of land. Mm-hmm. And all of us in real estate know, and I knew it academically, that land not purchased at the right time could be the most risky real estate investment you could ever make. And friends and family, including my mom, invested in this deal, and we were on a tear. New York City, up in Bear Mountain Park area by West Point, beautiful views of the Hudson River and the Bear Mountain Bridge, and it was going great. And one of my partners was a local developer, so we had that expertise. And what we did not foresee was the stock market crash of 1987. Okay. And everything, as you know, in real estate, when you've got a depression, it's just not good. Mm-hmm. And we kept on. As a matter of fact, one of the things, and I think you talked about integrity being important, all three of these individuals, we were all West Point graduates, and we basically got to a point that we had to carry this land because we had a little income coming up for it, but not enough to take care of the debt service. Mm-hmm. And what we did, because we had family and friends, we carried this thing for about a year, maybe a little over a year, because we thought that the market was going to turn around. And what I mean by carried it is we serviced the debt. And as you know, there's normally a capital call. And if people don't call, they get squeezed down. Mm-hmm. Three partners basically did the capital, and we did not squeeze down the limited partners. And that, I think that's called integrity, because these are family and friends. My mom was in this thing, okay? And it turned around, and let's just say it didn't work, okay? And it was a colossal personal failure, because people whom you are looking at and who respect you, and you lost their money. And that's tough, okay? And that was a challenge that I went through. But I felt good in the end, because believe me, I sacrificed my wife having curtains and other things, and as an entrepreneur, to sleep there at night and say, oh my gosh, I got this payment coming due at the end of the quarter, and where are we going to get it? And it's look, I've got other stories that were very successful, but what I'm telling the audience is entrepreneurship is real, and it's not easy. Mm-hmm. It's not for the faint of heart. However, this is what I tell everybody doing entrepreneurship. It's okay to try it, because you can always go get a job. That's your safety net.
Absolutely.
Okay. So that one was somewhat challenging. Then in JLL, I tell you, I had this meteoric rise, make managing director in like 4 years or something, and started this new group that you talked about in the introduction, public institutions at West Point, going very well. And there were some challenges in terms of how we implemented the work. So I had to go out and get the work. And when I brought it back to the firm, I would have to recruit people in the firm to do the work. And I did that for about a year and a half. And I used to say I had to sell twice. Had to convince the person to do it. Then I had to come back in the firm. I said, hey, look, we need to reorganize this and do this and that, et cetera. And it's, I know, Herman, this thing's going great. You just keep doing what you're doing. And I got to a point that I just said, you know what? This isn't working for me. And back in my youth, when I was very desirable for other employers, yeah, I was getting calls all the time. So I got this one call from a local company here. And they said, we'd like you to come and be chief operating officer and run this portion of our business, which was finance. Mm-hmm. And I basically just came to that point. I said, okay, I'm going to try something new. And good things here, I think, to learn from. JLL, when I said that I was going to leave, they came back. And this is why I tell everybody I learned from this. You don't want to tell your good talent how good they are as they're walking out of the door. Okay. Praise and recognize them every day. And I would tell you, made me feel like a king, gave me a blank sheet of paper, said, design what you think it ought to be, whatever. And it's where integrity comes down as well. I said, well, I've already given a commitment to this firm that I'm going to take this job. So I'm going to do that. And as luck would have it, I was in one of my exit interviews, and this business I had started probably still needed some of my strategic guidance, you might say. Mm-hmm. So I said, well, look, you consider staying on the board of our America's subsidiary, which was 50% of the company. Mm-hmm. And I knew right away, Lisa, that the answer was yes, but I couldn't jump at it. I said, well, let me think about that. And what happened is I basically took the job on the board, and they said, well, look, we're not going to pay you. We're not going to give you equity, which was great. And it was 10,000 shares a year. And I'll let anybody go look up the price of JLL stock today. You can figure out that that worked out pretty well. And then I went and ran this other organization. Mm-hmm. And the organization I ran, which is now a public company, the patriarch was running the company, recruited me to come and run the company. And part of my deal, I won't get into, I've got a non-disclosure, I can't get too much into it. But part of my deal was that on the 366th day that I'm at this company, I'm granted ownership in the company at a pretty nice deal. Because remember, I'm at JLL doing very well. And to entice me to do something else, there was some frustration on this implementation of how we did the business. So that was some frustrations, but however, we had this opportunity. And you talked about disappointments. I got this company into the university market because I'd done a lot of work at JLL in that market. I knew the people, and it was a company that worked very closely with Fannie Mae on mortgages, and it just was going great. And I tell you that 366 day thing, at about the 340th day, I was called in and told we're going a different direction.
Oh, no.
Okay. And this is after I had just poured my heart and soul into this. And what happened from there is it took us a while to disengage. And let's just say I did pretty well on the disengagement. And I had to work again one day, but it wasn't the next day. However, my wife and I, we put that in the bank. And I'll never forget, on the way, my son, we're going to talk about our kids here later, but my oldest son, Herman Jr., was going to West Point, and we drove him to West Point. During the process of that drive, I dictated 2 business plans in my life. One had to do with consulting, which obviously I knew. I had just, people already had been calling me to say, hey, come help me with this, help me with that. So that was a consulting angle. And then the other one, there's an adage that said, when you're in finance, you have financial assets working for you. That's the only way you make money while you sleep. Consulting, I got to do hours. I got to leverage by hiring other people. If I'm doing financial assets and I'm getting paid a fee for something, I get paid 365 by 24. Okay. Think about that. So I wrote the 2 business plans, and in the process, with the reputation I had, word got out that I had left this job, and JLL called and said, will you come back? The University of Pennsylvania had been one of my biggest clients. And the person that I worked with mostly there was the executive vice president, a guy named John Fry, who's now the president of Drexel. He was leaving to become president of Franklin and Marshall College. And he was working for Judith Rodin, who was the president. And they were sitting there, oh my gosh, because John and I had done a lot of work. I left out. I'd done a lot of work at the University of Pennsylvania with JLL in terms of helping them put their real estate strategy together and implement it.
Mm-hmm.
And John said, well, hey, I heard Herman is leaving. Let's call Herman. And Judith Roden called me up and she said, Herman, I would like for you to come and join my team. And shot out of the dark. And I tell you, I've written these 2 business plans, and this is falling right into one of them, which is the consulting.
The consulting piece, right?
Yeah. And I told President Roden, I said, I tell you what, I won't work for you, but how about if I work with you? And you can't hire me, but you can hire my firm. Now, I didn't have a firm at the time, but I immediately went out and started Bulls Advisory Group. And basically, my first client was the University of Pennsylvania, helping them. And let's just say I charged them the same way I was charged at JLL. And for a couple of days a week, with the value I was adding, I was more than able to cover the base salary at JLL. As you know, real estate is base and bonus.
Absolutely.
So that worked well. Now, at the same time, I went and did my exit interview with Fannie Mae from this other company that I had.
Right.
And they said, why don't you consider working for us, being Fannie Mae? Mm-hmm. And I said, I thought about that. And this is where I said, instead of me working for you, why don't I work with you? That's where I said this, not with Judith. Mm-hmm. They said, okay, long story short, your listeners will know there was a firm called Bulls Capital Partners, which was a finance company with Fannie Mae to do multifamily financing, of which my original partner was SunTrust Bank. Then I eventually had a partner called Goldman Sachs, and I eventually sold the company to Guggenheim. And I'll just go straight through that. Now, at the same time, I'm doing the Penn thing. I'm working on the Fannie Mae thing, by the way, it took 2.5 years to do. It didn't happen overnight because it's a de novo company started, because I had to have employees, I had to investors. And, that's why I tell people, keep some dry powder, because when opportunities come along, you want to be able to take advantage of them. And then at the same time, JLL calls and says, we understand you're no longer working. Would you like to come back? Lisa, I said no 4 times, because I said, hey, I'm doing this, because I had decided when I had that experience at the other firm I went to when I left JLL, that somebody else having total control of my professional happiness
was not the way.
And one day they can call in when everything's going great. Mm-hmm. And there were reasons they wanted to make the change that for them were very valid. But for me, I poured my heart and soul into this, and it was very successful. So it didn't make sense. And finally, on the 5th time, remember, I'm on the board at JLL, and we were in Ojai on 9/11 at a board meeting in California. And I had a meeting with the chairman and CEO. And he told me at breakfast, he said, Herman, I know you're starting this other company, because remember, it took 2.5 years to get this thing started. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I've got my wife working, bless her soul, and I've got this other consulting gig that's doing very well. Mm-hmm. And I said, yeah, I'm going to do that. He said, Stuart Scott, unfortunately, Stuart died about 3 years ago. He said, Herman, I'm going to make you the luckiest entrepreneur in the world. I said, what are you talking about, Stuart? He said, I would like for you to consider coming back to JLL and giving us the time you can to run this public institutions business for us. Another one of those moments where you don't just go, oh yeah, that's great. Because I had thought about that. Because I said, I got all this stuff going on and I can really direct this business, because leadership is about vision. It's about having the market contacts, about making the connections. And I said, I know I can do that. And I still told him, I said, let me think about it. And so went back, thought about it for a while. I said, Stuart, I think we can make this work. So look at what I have now. Mm-hmm. My consulting company going, Penn, and I had another account. And I really later got another huge account for that company. Mm-hmm. I've got working on starting the Fannie Mae Bulls Capital Partner business.
Yes.
And JLL asked me to come back. And I eventually said yes. And for 10 years, I had one office here in McLean, Tyson's Corner area for my Bulls Capital Partners.
Mhm.
My JLL office downtown. I would go back and forth on days. And then I still had my consulting company where I would spend 2 days a week at the University of Pennsylvania. And technology of the BlackBerry, and I got with my technology person at JLL, and I said, I need to be able to get mail at Bulls Advisory Group on this device. And now, obviously, the iPhone, people know you can have as many emails as you want. And we figured out a way that I could get my JLL email as well as my Bulls Advisory Group email. And as I'm riding the train to go up to Penn, I'm handling JLL work. I'm still working on getting Bulls Capital started, et cetera. So it was and then around the same time, I got my first public company board, of which I think I've been on 7 now. And I got my first public company board.
Wow.
And we just had all of this stuff going. And if that wasn't enough, over the next probably 18 months, my son Jonathan was at West Point playing football.
Mm-hmm.
We made it to all of his games. And we built this beautiful home, my wife and I. So we had all of that going on over probably a two-year period.
What a blessing.
So the point of that, all of this came after you asking me about a failure.
Yes.
About the investment group that didn't work and what we did to make it better.
Right.
Make it better, and it still didn't work. And then I told you about basically getting fired. And Lisa, getting fired for the lifestyle I have now was the best thing that ever happened to me, because I learned that I had the privilege of using one of the most powerful 2-letter words in the English language, and that is saying no. So somehow, through a few sleepless nights, all of that came together, and I'm where I am now. And I sold that company, did very well on it, continued to get corporate boards, continued for a couple more years to run the public institutions branch at JLL, and then had opportunities. JLL had asked me actually to take on a significant role, which would have resulted in me being a succession plan to being CEO. And I said no to that because I was having so much fun. I haven't regretted that decision one day because of the autonomy I had and have to this day to run my career. So beautiful relationship.
I don't know. I think, you know what, you tied it all together from point A to point B to point C, because here's the thing, Herman. It's through the valleys. It's through the valleys. What we think are the valleys are the disappointments that we're able to maneuver into what we're supposed to be. I mean, that to me is your life story there. From you talking about the failure led to a greater opportunity. Like you said, there was a way for you to say no in order to open up a broader, more opportunity that led to all the successes of which you just went through. And I think I remember during the time, I think I had just married Lawrence during the time that you opened up, I believe, the consulting company, I want to say, during that time. And so I actually followed you from that point forward. But it's through the valleys, I always say that, where we get our greatest opportunities. And I want to ask one more question, then I want to just end about your family, if I can. And here's a follow-up question. What have you noticed about people who are capable of initiating change? Why are they hesitant? What do they seem to compromise the most? Does it go back to the fact that maybe there is a portion of their character that is not mature enough? They're not developed enough in order to initiate that change with courage? I mean, you have through this interview, you have given several examples of your courage to initiate change, to not always do the most popular thing, not always make the most popular decision. What have you noticed about those that do that?
I think it comes down to self-expectation. I'm going to tell you that by kind of going through back to my, high school. And Lisa, I had phenomenal high school career. 17 years old. I'm first Black full-time quarterback. I'm from the South, and this is back in the 70s when Black quarterbacks weren't the thing to have. Okay, but look at the NFL now.
Right.
I was president of student council. I was record holder in the high jump, National Honor Society, Boys State. I mean, just everything. And all of my teachers and counselors were telling me how great I was going to be. And as a 17-year-old little skinny Black kid from Alabama, that was scary. I didn't know what my potential. I mean, I'm in this little town, and yeah, I'm doing okay in this little town, but there's a big old world out there. And probably one of the better decisions I made was to go to West Point because I had other options. And I decided then I'm going to try something hard. Okay. And I did the West Point thing. And then another thing that I noticed there, and I noticed this later in life, and people have heard me talk, I talk about the difference between networking and connecting. I had to ask myself, why was I in this school in the early 70s that was 16% Black? Why was I president of student council? Okay. And you come back in the 70s now, right after the remnants of Martin Luther King assassination is still in the air. Okay. And I analyzed it, and I came back in a concept that I followed religiously. And I did it back then and didn't know it. And it's the difference between connecting and networking. Networking is phenomenal. People need to do it. However, in my opinion, it's very transactional in nature. That's not bad, but it's, Lisa, what can I do for you? And what can you do for me? And let's do it, and let's network and make that happen. Okay. Connecting on the other part is when you're willing to do something for or with someone without regard as to what you're going to receive in return. And if you have that reputation and can be words that when you said your opening and you use the word authenticity, consistency, okay, reliability, when you can do that, you establish your brand, your personal brand. And if your personal brand is such that people identify with it, you're going to be generally successful. And I learned that it's a God-given talent for me. But I came aware of it is, how did I swim through that stream to achieve the things I did in high school? And those same concepts I've used throughout my business career. And it's helped me. Look, when I started Bulls Capital Partners, I had to put several $1 million in it, but I needed multiples of that from a institutional capital source. I'm this kid going around, I got great credentials, but I'm putting a little money in, but I need you to give me a lot of money to start this company, which, by the way, I'm going to be controlling shareholder of. Okay. And that's persuasion and making people feel comfortable and connecting with them. So I hope I'm answering the question, but I just wanted to get that concept out there. And Lisa, I can't leave this without saying very quickly, I know we're running out of time, but I talked about one of the characteristics that I think are critical for success. And I talked about one of them already, which was leadership. I'm gonna go through the others very, very quickly. Interpersonal skills. And what I mean by the interpersonal skills is having the ability to relate to people, whether that's private or the general, the janitor or the CEO. And you do that by being a continuous learner.
That's right.
It's important to be a continuous learner. The next one is your communication skills. And that's ability to speak, write, and more importantly, listen. My mom used to tell me, you got 2 ears, 1 mouth, use them in that proportion. Okay. Your analytical skills are critical. Make sure you get feedback. And this is for your younger listeners and your older listeners. Get feedback to understand both your quantitative, and as most of us think of analytical skills as quantitative, when you're starting out, that's very important. As you go up through the organization and the corporation, your qualitative analytical skills are the most important thing that I use every day. Okay. And then we think about entrepreneurship or risk taking. And that's that ability to do, we can all do what everybody else does. But when do you take a risk? How do you take the risk? And what are your mitigating factors against the risk? I jumped out of airplanes, but I didn't do it without a parachute. So have some mitigants there. And the last thing to do, Lisa, around all of that is have passion for what you do. And if you can put those 6 things together, I think, and don't forget, leadership is that ability to influence a group to accomplish a common goal. So you put all that together, and it's great. So I'm sorry, I just had
No, you know what? I wouldn't expect anything less. And absolutely, I'll tell you what hit me the most, because I think we need more of it in this day and time, is when you said empathy, not sympathy, but empathy, empathizing with those around you, making emotional connections, not just professional kind of networking, transactional connections. I believe that there is room enough in business, especially with where we are in our culture and our society, is to make that emotional connection, because everyone's going home to something. Everybody has something that they're going home to. So the empathizing, emotional connection, I believe that I liked when you said that. It's definitely strong leadership. And I think that that is something that needs to be more emphasized when it comes to talking about successful leaders, more than ever, with everything that's going on in our world, especially with our next generation, mental health, all of it. So I appreciate you summarizing that. Here's what I wanted to end with. What do you believe you and your wife instilled in your sons that you're most proud of? And here's my second question. What qualities do you see in them, in your sons, that is, that reminds you of their mother?
Okay. So starting, just so your listeners know, my wife, Iris Burton Bulls, unfortunately left us too soon. She passed away about 2.5 years ago from pancreatic cancer.
Yes, I read all about her, Herman.
Her story is,
I read her story. She was an incredible woman. I read during the time that she had passed away, and I don't think I realized how deep her resume was. And
a lot of people didn't, and it was so amazing. I said, yeah, I'm Iris's Bull's husband.
exactly,
And
exactly.
however, she had this capacity that she did not need to be in the limelight, I should say. And, I'm kind of a little more gregarious, outgoing in that. So believe it or not, the yin and yang there worked perfectly. She was a dedicated mother, professional. Very quickly, she was in the military, Tufts University, admissions officer at West Point, presidential appointee under Presidential Clinton, was the number 2 person for personnel for the Army, millions of people that she was responsible for policy for, and then DOD. And when she retired and after she passed, the DOD, and this doesn't happen very often, named basically a fellowship in her behalf for ROTC students studying language and culture, because she helped set up that policy and office for the Department of Defense and therefore for our nation. And those were things. And she was very healthy. All of my kids to this day, one of the influences, they're all just phenomenal. They were phenomenal athletes. They're healthy. They eat well. We never had processed food in our house. She exercised at least 4 or 5 days a week. Just excellent health. And the thing that was important to her, and I'll tell you one thing she had, Lisa, and I wasn't as dedicated to her as she was. And this is what she said, Lisa: our kids will get read to every night. So we'd come back from something and the babysitter, and she said, or I just came back from work. She said, okay, you're going to read to the kids. I said, yeah, they'll be okay. They're sleeping. You're going to read to the kids tonight. And she was just adamant, dogmatic about it. And those qualities of things that she saw, and her undergrad degree was in education, just resonated with our kids. Our kids, let me tell you, she made them, they hated it. She made them go do extra counseling for school, those after school programs. And they all played college sports. You can imagine they were very, very busy. But her outlook was, we're going to prepare you and you're going to be ready. If you were talking to my kids right now, they would tell you that they hated that at the time and that they're so proud of that now. So my oldest son, Herman Jr., went to West Point, 3 combat tours in the current war on terrorism, Duke MBA, and he'll be thinking about leaving the Army, but he's now in Chicago working in the Army Enterprise Marketing Office, using his analytical skills and his knowledge of what it takes to be in the Army. Nathaniel, my middle son, went to Earlham College, 2-sport letterman there, and he worked in the healthcare field for about 10 or 12 years. And this year he's with American Express down in Florida, working in marketing and sales for them. Then my youngest son, Jonathan, also graduated West Point, and they tell me I was on the team at West Point. Jonathan actually played. He was very good, has a bowl ring as well that we got actually out in Dallas in the Military Bowl. And he stayed in for 6 years active duty, and he left the military, went to Duke for his MBA, and he's actually there in Dallas doing very, very, very well in sales with Microsoft. So those are the kids that we produced. Mm-hmm. I think with a lot of Iris's insistence, I mean, obviously I was out there for the sports part of it, and I was there to help them with their homework and all that, but her on the little things. You're going to take a music. Yeah, they had to take cello, for example, I remember. And you're going to do this and you're going to do that. And she was very supportive of them doing the sports and everything. However, she had a broader view of what it was going to be like as success. And I think probably the thing that I think my kids have seen most and I really identified with is when she got her role as grandmother. I'm going to tell you, she married me and that was probably a happy day. But let me tell you, when she became a grandmother, Lisa, this was her life. And many of your listeners may not be aware of this, but we've got, Herman has 3 children. And by the way, Jonathan and his wife are expecting their first in March.
Is that the one that's here in Dallas?
They're in Dallas, right?
Yes, Jonathan. Yes. Okay.
And so Herman has 2 sons, Connor and Quinn. And then he has a daughter, Kennedy, who was born on Iris's birthday.
Oh, wow. How special is that?
A special bond that they had. And so I think, as you know, from the successful kids that you have raised, it's about tough love.
Right.
Okay.
Yes, definitely.
And our kids definitely got some tough love. And they continue to get to this day, even though I don't pay their bills anymore. That thing called leadership, right?
Yeah.
See something, say something, because you want them to be successful.
Absolutely.
Iris, she, particularly in the health and diet, which all of them have such great habits, she modeled that behavior, even for me, because she was that disciplined about it and she cared about it. And that's what parenting, I think, is about. It's about modeling that behavior, what they see you do when nobody else is around, and whether it's cheating on your income taxes or stealing cable or whatever. That starts the character building foundation that they have that's going to propel them into adulthood and hopefully success.
Absolutely. We often, within my, circle of community here, we often talk about those things that we do. It's louder than the things that we can say to them. My son goes to school down in Dallas. We live in Plano, a smaller suburb. I don't know where Jonathan is in the city, but we live in a smaller suburb of Plano. So he drives down to Dallas. And there is a lady that for years, since he was in first grade, he's gone to the same school since first grade, that we have befriended, who is, lives in homeless shelter, right? But definitely is well taken care of by the city, but she's always out and we've always given her gifts and money. Well, he did not tell us, but he's been doing the same since he's been driving. But God. I was thinking to myself, for a 17-year-old to take note of her and to continue his relationship that he has seen with her since he was in first grade, riding in the car with us, and now he's on his own, it's because we modeled it. It's modeling it. Now, there's some things that we have modeled I don't want them to take, if I can really be honest. But for the most part, we hope that we've done something that they will take with them.
And I got to tell you, and another thing that we've done, and the boys, obviously, in our philanthropic activities, they take place. And we basically this year, a conference that I helped start at West Point, a diversity inclusion conference, our family endowed that conference this year with a pretty significant donation that it will exist forever. And it's the Iris and Herman Bowles and Family Diversity Inclusion Conference at West Point. It'll occur every year, reach throughout the Army. And next time we talk, there's another major institution that we're talking to do something else in Iris's name that I think the kids will, we've taught them philanthropy, and when your kids talk about modeling, when they see you share significant resources, they say, well, I could go on another vacation with that, or 2 or 3 or 4. I think that's important because it's not mine. I'm just a caretaker for it while I'm here. And Iris was so into education as well. We made another endowment, and she had talked about this one before she passed. 2 we did. One we did at her college, Virginia State University, because she worked in language and culture, and that's to have kids study abroad at Virginia State University, HBCU. And we did a similar one at West Point in the language department, where we want a minority kid to have an opportunity to go overseas.
That's significant. That is absolutely
So
significant.
those things will be there, forever.
Absolutely.
Associated with her name, and we want her memory to be and legacy.
Yes,
All
absolutely.
the things that she accomplished, because I really don't think I would be where I am without her.
I would concur with you. I would concur with you and agree with you wholeheartedly. And I definitely am very blessed that you were able to honor also Iris. When I thought about you, I thought about her. And so that was important for me. I have found this conversation very inspirational, more than what I thought. I knew it would be, but it's even gone beyond my expectations. So thank you.
Again, it was a privilege to be here today, and we often say too much is given, much is expected, and certainly what you are doing along with Lawrence to be a beacon of hope and leadership and support in the community. I think that is important, and I really appreciate this opportunity to share kind of a little part of my story.
Absolutely. Well, the honor was mine.
Well, Lisa, this was a pleasure again, and
It
thank
was.
you for what you're doing, not only for the community, but really for the nation.